Well, good morning, Velocity.
Am I on? Oh, there I am. It is so good to see you guys here this morning. If you don't know me, my name is Austin, and back in January, I taught a 3-week series called Crossroads, Life at the Intersection of Go and No, and I had so much fun doing it. If you were here, I hope you had even a fraction of the fun that I did during that time. And since then, Christy and the gang have been kind enough to invite me to come back. So here I am today. But before I jump into it this morning, I do want to just echo the words of Christy, and that today is the last day to sign up for Revive, and I would hate to see you miss out on this incredible opportunity. And I'll tell you that's coming from a guy who skipped out on a lot of retreats when I was in Velocity and in Fusion. I always came up with some excuse why I shouldn't go, like I have a game, I have practice, but there's always things I could have gotten out of if I was being honest. But I would always just choose not to go. But I did go a few times, and in those few times, I realized how much I had missed out on all the other ones. So I cannot recommend enough for you to take this time to sign up for Revive. You will not regret it, because these weekends, they are such interesting opportunities, such special times in which we can really just take a pause, take a breath, just take the weight off of our shoulders, look at our life, where it's at, where we want to be, what direction we're heading in, and seeing if those things all line up. And it's a very, very unique time in which you can really decide to get out of the passenger seat of your life, and rather than letting your life carry you along and just being a passenger in it, you can get in the driver's seat and say, you know what, I want to take ownership of my life, I know where I want to be, I know how I want to get there, and I am going to now sit in the driver's seat. So if you haven't signed up yet, I would so encourage you to do that, coming from someone who wishes I would have done it more. Now, this morning we're going to be talking about something that I am really, really excited about, because I think it's so practical. I think it's so relevant to each and every one of our lives. And something that really excites me about this message is that no matter who you are and no matter how you came in here today, this message is for you. So if you came in here today and you are like, I am sold out for Jesus, I want to live my life in accordance with him, whatever he says for my life, I want for my life, because I know what he says for me will be for my best, then congratulations, this message is for you. And if you came in here today and you're like, Austin, I'm just not sure. Maybe I used to believe this, but I'm just not sure where I'm at these days. Or maybe I'm just kind of coasting and going through the motions, then this message is for you. And frankly, if you came in here today, you're like, Austin, the only reason I'm here is because my parents made me be here. I don't want anything to do with God. I am not interested. Then this message is for you, because like I said, this message is incredibly practical. I think we can use it in our everyday lives. And I happen to believe that practical things still can be spiritual, and spiritual things can and should be practical. So what we're talking about today in this final week of our series called Got Stress is expectations, and how our expectations at times can bring us stress in our lives. And have you ever experienced one of those times when your expectations for something were really, really high, and then the experience was not so great? A few years ago, I found myself in Peru. I was 17 years old, and by some miracle, I still don't know how, I convinced my parents to let me fly to Peru by myself and go teach English for a month in this small coastal town. And so somehow I did it. I found myself on a plane, and soon enough, I was in Peru, and it was amazing. And Monday to Friday, we would teach English in this small one-room schoolhouse in one of the poorest areas I have ever been to, and I've been lucky enough to go to a lot of places, and it was such an amazing experience. But that was Monday to Friday. On the weekends, we could kind of do whatever we wanted. We were staying in this house with people from Germany and Switzerland and France and Mexico, and there were 4 of us from the U.S. who were all 17 and all far away from home and just looking to experience some new things. And so one of the weekends, after we had already been to a lot of the beaches, we had been to the museums, we had seen a lot of stuff, we're like, what do we want to do this weekend? You know, we want to make the most of our time here, so let's find something cool to do. And so we heard about this place we could go to. It was a petrified forest with ancient ruins. And I'm not even sure we knew what petrified meant, but we're like, that sounds rad. Like, let's do that. And we're thinking ruins like Machu Picchu. Like, we're in Peru. This is going to be awesome. And so we find out how we're supposed to get there. And it turns out you have to take some like public transportation. They're like, yeah, but it's not too far away, which never trust anyone in Peru that tells you it's not that far away. It's going to be forever. But we're like, okay, this will be worth it. And so we hop on some public transportation, which is a really nice way to say we got on an old sketchy bus or old sketchy van with no AC, and we're really crammed in. We had about an hour-long van ride down to where we were going. And so we're getting in there, and it kind of sucks, but we're like, this is going to be worth it where we're going. It's going to be awesome. And eventually the van driver turns around and tells us in Spanish, like, hey, this is your stop. And I'm like, I don't think so, because we were in the middle of nowhere. Like, there were no houses. There was nothing. And then I find out that, well, you're almost there. You actually have to now take a rickshaw ride to get where you're going. If you've never seen a rickshaw, think like a dirt bike with a little carriage on the back, except not like Central Park carriage, more like a wagon that feels like it's going to fall off. So 4 of us, we cram into this rickshaw, and it's hot outside, and dust and dirt is flying on all of us, and we're like coughing up dirt. We're covered in dirt. We're like, it's okay. It's going to be worth it. So eventually we arrive at the trailhead, and there's like chickens everywhere, and we're like, this is a little weird, and there's no one else there, but we're like, I heard it's going to be cool. Our expectations are high, so we're like, this is going to be great. Let's do it. And so we start hiking, and I'm starting to wonder, like, maybe, what did petrified mean again? Because I was thinking like trees like frozen in time that are super old, and honestly it just looked like a bunch of trees in winter, like it was trees without leaves. So I was a little bummed, to say the least, but I was like, don't worry, like I'm the optimist in the group. I'm trying to keep everyone's spirits up. Like it's going to be, okay, the petrified forest thing, a little bit of a letdown. I know like our expectations aren't lining up with our experience, but that's okay. There's going to be ruins, and they're going to be amazing. We're talking things that are like thousands of years old. This is going to be awesome. Trust me, guys. And so we would see these markers that would say, like 2 miles away, 1.5 miles, half a mile. Soon enough, we realized we're about to turn the corner, and there they're going to be. So we walk up, and we've been hiking for hours. We're hot, we're sweaty, we're tired. We just want to see something cool. And so we turn the corner, and there it is, a pile of dirt. It was literally just a pile of dirt with a couple broken shards of, I guess, pottery. And needless to say, we were feeling a little disappointed in that moment. Because what had happened, and what happens so often in life, is we set one expectation, and then when our experiences don't align with our expectations, we experience stress. We start to get annoyed. We get irritable. Even if it's a small thing, when our experiences don't line up with our expectations, we experience stress. And not only that, but a simple truth that we all know, this isn't new information to you, is that our expectations will always affect our experience. Our expectations will always affect our experience. And you know this. And this is why, and it can work in both ways. It can be good and it can be bad. So at the start, our high expectations were making that hot and just crammed van ride and the rickshaw ride. It made it all feel worth it, right? Because we knew that at the other side of this, there's going to be something awesome. So our expectations were affecting our experience, and they were making it seem more positive than it was. But then the other way can work too. So when we were finally let down and our experience was so far short of our expectations, it felt even worse. And that's why in life we can experience something that's actually not that bad, but we thought was going to be great, and it ends up being a giant disappointment because our experience and our expectations don't line up. And that's when we experience stress. And all throughout this series, we've defined stress as an internal disruption of peace in response to external factors. And in these situations, we have this one idea, and then when it's not, and then when our experience isn't that, we experience stress. And we all experience stress. Like, if they had consulted me on this one, I think I would have changed the series from Got Stress ? To Got Stress, period, right? Because we all have stress. It's just a fact of life. But the problem is so often we take it that we can't do anything about our stress. That stress just happens to us, and that's all there is. It's just how it will always be. But the scary thing about that to me is the simple truth that you can't be your best when you're stressed. You can't be your best when you're stressed, and you've experienced this, right? That's why when you take a test and you're feeling really stressed and you're anxious and you're worried and you're tense, you don't do as well as you would if you're at peace and you felt good, you felt calm in that moment, you felt confident in that moment. Or if it's a sports game or a sports tryout, if you go in and you're all stressed and you're tense, you will not be your best. You can't be your best when you're stressed. And this unfortunate thing that many of us have come to believe about Jesus is that he came just to help us get to heaven and doesn't really care that much about our lives. But when we look at the life of Jesus and the teaching of Jesus, we see that Jesus is all about us experiencing our best. And if we can't be our best when we're stressed, then you can bet that Jesus wants us to not be stressed. He wants us to find peace, and you would think that that would be something he would have talked about. And it just so happens that it was. In a document that would later be called the Gospel of John, written by one of Jesus' best friends who walked with him, talked with him, ate with him over the course of a few years, John records what Jesus had to say about how we can find peace and then how we can be our best. And this comes in John chapter 16, which is a good ways through the book of John. And about the first half of the book of John, the first 10 chapters or so, it covers the life and ministry of Jesus and his 3-year ministry pretty quickly. And it rolls through and it tells us about his teaching, his miracles, people he heals, all the things he goes around and says and does, and it all covers and it flies by pretty fast. And then in the second half, John really slows things down. John focuses in on the last week or so of Jesus' life. And up to this point, John has showed us how the disciples, they were just generally confused. Jesus was talking in riddles and parables. They didn't know what's going on. And then in the second half, John slows it down. And Jesus gets real serious with the guys. And he tells them, look, I know you had this one expectation, but things are actually going to be a little different. I know you thought by following me that I was going to be this king and I was going to overthrow the Romans, and then you guys were going to live lives of luxury at my right and left hand. While I will be king, it won't be anything like you thought. I won't be king on this earth, but I will show you a new kingdom. And he begins setting some very realistic expectations with them, telling them it's not going to be exactly what you thought it was going to be. And at the end of John chapter 16, Jesus has something to say about how we can find peace. And he says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And when I look at that and I know that it's the last verse in that chapter, and I see that Jesus says, I've told you these things so that you might have peace, I just naturally assume that the things that he would say would be like, yeah, everything's going to be great, like everything's going to be good, don't worry, we've got this, it won't be bad at all. I don't know about you, but that would bring me peace. But when we look at what Jesus was talking about there, it can be a little confusing at first, because at the beginning of John chapter 16, that is anything but what Jesus had to say. What Jesus says to them in the beginning of John chapter 16 is he gets very serious with them. He looks them in the eye. He says, this is going to be hard. First, he tells them they're going to kick you out of the synagogue, which you might be like, okay, big deal. Why does that matter? But for them, the synagogue would have been the central point of their social lives, the central point of their spiritual lives. It would have been a really big deal. It'd be like getting kicked out of your school, getting blocked on all your social media, being alone, essentially. You are now an outcast. But as if that wasn't bad enough, Jesus keeps going. And he tells them, not only are you going to get kicked out of the synagogue, but there's coming a time pretty soon when people are going to be trying to kill you. And by the way, while they're doing it, they're going to think they're doing God a favor. I don't know about you, but that is the last thing that would bring me peace. Like, you want to stress me out, tell me that people are about to kill me and think they're doing God a favor. Like, that is stress. That would not bring me peace. And chances are that probably wouldn't bring you peace. So what is Jesus talking about here when he says, I have told you these things so that you might have peace? And then sums it up with, in this world you will have trouble. Jesus is revealing to them something so powerful about expectations and about peace and about how we can be our best and how we can interact with this world that often is hard. What he's telling them here is the simple truth that the path to peace is through the proper perspective. The path to peace is through the proper perspective. What he's telling them is, look, if you go into this world and you think it's all going to be great and fine and dandy and rainbows and sunshine, then your experience is not going to line up with that, and you are going to be disappointed. And not only will you be disappointed, but you are going to experience stress. And so he sets them a very realistic expectation in this moment. He gives them the proper perspective. He's saying, I've told you these things so that you are ready for them, so that you know what to do when this world does give you trouble. But the really unfortunate thing is so often I hear this verse cited by Christians to mean something that I don't think Jesus was getting at. You see, so often people cite this verse and they'll be like, see, Jesus said, in this world you will have trouble. And they mean that to say, yep, so life sucks, people suck, everything sucks. It's all going to be pretty terrible. May as well wait it out, and then I guess like heaven will be pretty cool at the end. But until then, everything's going to be pretty horrible. Which frankly just blows my mind, because if there were ever a group of people that should be optimists, it should be the people that believe that the God behind the universe is a God who loves us with an unending love, who sees us, who wants to enter into our lives to guide us into our best. I don't know how those people could be the people who are the most pessimistic. I do not think that's what Jesus was getting at here. I think it is something a little bigger than that. Because yes, Jesus says, in this world you will have trouble. That's a fact. God created a good world, but we have thoroughly messed it up, and there are bad things that happen every day. But Jesus doesn't end it there. He goes on to say, after he says, in this world you will have trouble, he says, but take heart, which is to say, but fear not, but don't worry, don't stress, for I have overcome the world. And when Jesus would talk about the world, and when John and later Paul would talk about the world, they're not just talking about this giant floating rock that orbits around the sun. They're talking about the systems we've created, these ways in which we've ordered the world to be a place where we use power to get ahead at other people's expense, a place in which we allow bitterness and greed and hatred to fuel us. He is saying, I have overcome that. He's saying, I have overcome hate with love. I have overcome violence with peace. I have overcome, and yes, I will overcome this Roman Empire, but I will do it by dying at their hands and showing them what it means to live a truly perfect life. And what he's telling us here is, yes, in this world you will have trouble. Yes, things aren't as they're supposed to be, and we need to have that proper perspective. But he's saying also that not all hope is lost, that he is showing us a way to live in a world that's gone bad and still find peace, to have chaos around us and to still walk in peace. He's setting us accurate expectations for life. And if expectations often lead to stress, when I break down how expectations lead to stress, I often see it in two main areas where our expectations can give us stress. And the first is our expectations with things, with events, with circumstances, with just how we expect things to go. And so often, if we're being honest, we set up these expectations that everything's going to go exactly how I want it, even though every day that expectation is shattered. And the thing about our expectations with our circumstances is, if they're not accurate, our experiences are always going to let us down. And it could be in small things or it could be in big things. Your expectations could just look like, you might not even say it, you might not even consciously think it. But your expectation might be, hey, I had a really long day and I just want to come home and relax. And then your mom or your dad makes you go do something, or your younger siblings are being obnoxious, or something comes up, or your cat throws up, and you're just like, all of a sudden really, really stressed out, and you don't even know why. But it's because your experience and your expectations aren't lining up, and we're experiencing stress in that moment. So what can we do? If that's going to keep happening, how do we get through that stress? How do we set better expectations? And to start, it looks like in those moments when we feel ourselves getting stressed, when we feel that our experience and our expectations aren't lining up and stress is building inside of us and we're getting tense and we're just feeling that anxiety, it starts with reminding ourselves, okay, the path to peace is through the proper perspective. So we take a pause, we just breathe for a second, and then we look at the situation, we zoom out and we say, okay, you know what, I'm going to own it. I am stressed right now, and I'm stressed right now because my experience and my expectations aren't lining up, and that's what happens when that happens. But then we look at that, and with the proper perspective, and something so powerful about following Jesus is he gives us a new perspective on our lives, that even the big things, if we can look at it and we're saying, this is a big thing for me, we can look at our lives in light of eternity and God's plan for us and God's purpose for life and for his world and say, you know what, even though I'm feeling stressed right now, even though my expectations and my experience aren't lining up, I can pause, I can breathe, and I can say, it's okay. Because the path to peace is through the proper perspective. And with the proper perspective, I can see that I'm okay. That it's okay. Even though this isn't going how I want it. Even though my expectations and my experience could not be further apart. I can say, it's okay. I'm okay. And so often stress comes for us because we want to control things. And then things seem to get out of control. And I don't know what this says about me as a person. It might be a bad thing. I don't really know. But frankly, if I'm being honest, if I could control every situation, I absolutely would. And my guess is you probably would too. Because we like being in control of our situations. We learn throughout our life that when we're in control of our situations, things generally go better for us. When we're in control, we don't get hurt. When we're in control, we perform better. When we're in control, things seem to go as planned for us. But what we find day in and day out is that we're not as in control as we want to be. So in order to find peace, even amidst chaotic circumstances and circumstances that just seem to be going haywire and our expectations and our experiences are not lining up, what we need to do in that moment is recognize what we can control and what we can't control. Remind ourselves, really the only thing I can control is myself. But frankly, that's enough. Because the important thing to understand about this is that when you're in control of yourself, you're as in control of every circumstance as you could possibly be. And this is because, and this is so important, when you're in control of yourself, what happens to you doesn't have to go through you. When you're in control of yourself, even if you're not in control of your circumstances, what happens to you doesn't have to go through you. And this is what Jesus demonstrated, and this is what Jesus calls us to. He's saying that even in a chaotic world, even in a world where you will have trouble, even when things go bad, even when your outside circumstances, everything around you is stressful, in you, that doesn't have to happen. Inside of you, you can carry peace in that circumstance, even when everything around you says otherwise. Your external factors don't have to disrupt your internal peace. But there is a second area where our expectations can cause us stress. And I think for many of us, this is the even more difficult one, the even more painful one. And that's our expectations with people. Because so often, the times that we get most deeply hurt, we experience the deepest stress, the deepest anger, the deepest pain is with people. It's when our expectations for people are one thing, and then we experience something different. And it might look like you had this best friend all throughout elementary school and middle school that you thought you guys would always be together. And then in high school, you guys' paths split. And you're wondering what happened. You had this expectation that you guys were always going to be there for each other, and they let you down. Or maybe it's someone who told you that they would always be with you. They're your partner in crime, or they will love you forever. And then they don't. And our expectations and our experience, they don't line up, and we experience pain and we experience hurt. And as a result of this, many of us do something that scares me because it's so effective in a way, but also robs us of so much. Our response often, when people let us down, when our expectations and our experience with people are different, oftentimes what we do is we just set really low expectations for people. Because we learn that if we set really low expectations, then people can't hurt us. If our expectations are really low, then we don't have to worry about being disappointed. And like I said, the scary thing is, it kind of works. It does keep us from getting hurt. And so many of us, we just make this our modus operandi, and we just always do it like that. But the problem with that is, while setting really low expectations may keep you from getting hurt, it will also keep you from experiencing what you were always meant to in relationships. You see, God created us as relational beings. He created us as people that are better together. He created us in such a way that we experience the greatest joys, the greatest highs in our life when we're with other people. But we will never experience the fullness of human relationships. We will never experience all that God meant for us to experience in our relationships if we are keeping our expectations for people low and just waiting for them to let us down. Because here's the thing. Here's what we have to do when it comes to people. And it might seem hard, and it might seem to go against everything that the world seems to tell you. It might go against everything your experiences are telling you you should do. But here is what I see, and you're free to disagree with me, but what I see as the best alternative for this and what I think that God would have us do too. And that's when it comes to our expectations with others, we're going to believe the best and have grace for the rest. When it comes to our expectations with other people, we're going to believe the best and have grace for the rest. You might be saying, but Austin, how can I believe the best in people when they give me every excuse to do otherwise? And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying that people don't consistently let people down. I'm not saying that people give you every reason to believe other than the best. But my question for you is, what's your alternative? And how's that working for you? You're welcome to believe the worst in people. I won't stop you from that. But how's that working for you? Because here's the simple truth. When we believe the worst in people, we will draw out the worst in people. And this happens in two ways. It happens because our brains, they like to confirm what we already believe. So when we believe the worst about someone, we will see and confirm that belief that we already have. So we will pick up on all the things that confirm the fact that they are the worst. But not only that, people have an uncanny ability to rise and fall to your expectations. So when you believe the worst in people, you will draw out their worst. But the alternative is to believe the best in people and draw out their best, to believe the best in people and see the best in others. I have this fundamental belief, and you are welcome to disagree with me, but it's that people are wonderful, and they're wonderful messes. People are wonderful, and they're wonderful messes just like you and just like me. And they get it wrong, and they get their intentions, their motives mixed up, and sometimes they do things that are downright evil. But when we choose to believe the best and have grace for the rest, we choose to bring out the best in others. And you say, but what happens when they let us down? Because if I believe the best, they will inevitably let me down. And you're right, they will. That's where we believe the best and we have grace for the rest. Because grace is that thing that we so desperately desire from others when we've messed up, and we're so hesitant to give away when others have wronged us. Grace is something we crave, we desire more than anything when we know we've messed up, but we're so hesitant to give it away. And again, I'll tell you, you're welcome to do otherwise. You're welcome to hold on to bitterness and unforgiveness, but how is that working for you? How is that working for you? Because that, I promise you, will keep you from experiencing the fullness that God wants for you with other people. And I'm not saying you always have to keep these people super close to you, but I am saying we do have to believe the best and have grace for the rest. And I'm not trying to pretend to understand what people might have done to you or what you might have been through. That is entirely legitimate. But again, what's the alternative? But you might ask, how? How can we have grace for the rest when people let us down, when they frankly don't deserve it? Even if that's what I want from others, I would not give grace to that. How can I give grace for the rest? There might be multiple ways of doing this, but I only see one thing that would ever empower me to be able to do that. It's the simple idea that we can believe the best and have grace for the rest, because that's what Jesus does for us. See, the entire story of humanity, the entire unfolding drama that the Bible tells is a story in which God creates us as his prized possession, who creates this wonderful, good world and tells us to rule over it, to go enjoy it, to have fun. He creates us in his image, and we are the apple of his eye, and he loves us. And then we turn our back on him. He gives us every opportunity for success, and we say thanks, but no thanks. And as the drama of the Bible unfolds, it tells the story time and time again of how we try to run from God, how we try to tell him that I don't need you in my life, and God constantly chases after us and says, it doesn't matter what you've done, I will still believe the best, and I will always have grace for the rest. And you see the story of the Israelites as God reveals himself to this one nation, and he delivers them out of slavery. And what is the first thing they do? They turn their back on him. They turn their back on him, but God says, I'm not giving up on you. I will never give up on you. And the Bible tells this story time and time again where God gives people every reason to trust him, where God pursues people, where God loves them endlessly. And we say thanks, but no thanks. And we continue to run from God, and God says, I will always believe the best and give grace for the rest. I will chase you down. I will always be here for you. There is no amount of distance you could try to run from me. I will always be there for you. Up to the point where he comes in human form to live with us and eat with us and teach us and walk alongside of us in the form of Jesus of Nazareth. And for 3 years, he goes around and he teaches people and he tells them there is a better way for life and that God still hasn't given up on them. God still looks at us and gives us this mission for life, believing the best in us, that we are worthy of carrying his name out into the world, that we are worthy of extending his purposes on earth, even when we've given him every reason to stop believing in us. He says, I still want you on my team. He still believes the best in us and has grace for the rest in us, even to the point that he chose to die at the hands of his own creation to demonstrate to us that there is nothing we could do that would ever separate us from him. As he hung on a Roman cross with nails in his hands and feet, as we spat on him and hurled insults at him and mocked him, all he had to say was, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. As we were killing him, he said, I still believe the best in them, and I will always have grace for the rest in them. We can go through our lives believing the best and having grace for the rest in others, even when everything says we shouldn't, even when everything says that might end up getting us hurt, even when everything says they don't deserve that. Because that's what's been done for us. You see, as we close out this series on stress, we don't just talk about stress because we think it's a little nuisance that we want you guys to get rid of, or we think it's just a nice thing to talk about. We talk about stress because we know and we believe that you can't be your best when you're stressed, and we want nothing for you but your best. That's exactly what Jesus wants for you too. He wants you to be able to walk through this world that is stressful and chaotic and that throws everything it has at you to disrupt your peace, and he wants you to still walk with peace, and walk with purpose, and see things from his perspective and realize that I'm okay, that you're okay, that we're okay, that everything is going to be okay. See, stress, it will rob you of the peace that you are meant to have and meant to carry throughout this life, the peace that will allow you to be your best. And so I hope throughout this series, you've been able to see stress in a new light, that you can see what happens around you doesn't have to happen in you, what happens to you doesn't have to go through you. I hope that you can remember that the path to peace is through the proper perspective, that no matter how chaotic things are in life, we can see them with fresh eyes and realize that we're okay. And I hope most of all, that we are able to walk away from this series and we can believe the best in others. We can believe the best and bring them to their best, because that's what we want for us. And we can give grace. We can give grace even when it doesn't make sense, because we know that's what's been done for us. Let's pray. Dear God, I thank you for what you are doing in this world, God. I thank you that you want nothing for us but our best. I thank you that you entered into this world to show us that you are for us, that you love us, and that no matter how far we try to run from you, you will always be there for us. God, I pray that even today, for some of us here, We might say, God, I've been running for a long time, or God, I've been saying thanks, but no thanks. God, I've been keeping you at an arm's length. But today, I want to link arms with you because I know that you want nothing but my best and you want the best for others, and that's what I want too. God, I pray that in life we can walk through our chaotic circumstances and still find the peace that you desire for us. I thank you for all you're doing in this world, and I thank you that you still want us to be a part of it, even when we've given you every reason to discount us. God, we love you and we praise you, for it's in your Son, Jesus Christ's name, that we pray. Amen.